Welcome everyone to this webinar. We are very excited to be here and we have a lot of content, a lot of great insights to share. But before we get started, one thing is that we really want this to be more interactive. So if you have, let's say, more questions, please feel free to post them. We're going to be answering a few questions along with our talk track as well. And we do have a Q&A towards the end in which we'll be taking specific questions that you may have between us, right? So you have us here. If you have any questions, do post on the chat. All right. So with that, I'll get us started. And if we move to the next page, really diving right into it, right? What is going to be our agenda for today? We're going to be setting base on what is happening in the market, right? So there's a lot of events that have been happening throughout the year. There are a lot of risks that have come up, macroeconomic events, technology changes. So we're going to be setting base on what's been happening and how is it that outsourcing is evolving over time. So there's a new era in outsourcing that has come up, and there's a lot of changes that buyers need to make as they think about making decisions about outsourcing going forward. So we'll start with that, and we'll be covering more about rethinking outsourcing decisions in this time of tech, risk, and AI, right? So, how do we sort of balance innovation along with resilience? And we're going to be sharing a very strong case in point. So, we have a lot of data and a lot of research that we've collected across Everest Group in terms of which IT categories do get outsourced more, in terms of what is the impact they create, what is it that gives more value when you outsource, and what are the sub functions that you're seeing more value in outsourcing. So we'll be covering more on that. Case in point, very strong case in point of IT outsourcing and what's changing. We have Mukesh for that. And last but not the least, next steps, right? What do you do as a buyer as you plan ahead for the future? So, with that, I'll quickly get us started. And just again, what is happening in the world, right? How have we evolved from the 1980s, and what stage are we in right now? So, if we move to the next slide, what we'll see is that there's a 1980s era that we started with outsourcing, in which, if you may, some of you may have been in the industry at that time as well. We don't know, there are a lot of participants here, but if you were, you would know that outsourcing started with an emphasis on cost leverage, right? So it was not that we were outsourcing entire processes. We started with sending off few roles to different countries. We thought we would get some labor arbitrage, some cost benefits, and that is where we started. Towards in the future 2000s, there's a lot of digital impact that came in. There was offshoring that was happening, and what we saw was that it wasn't just few roles, it was moving to different processes also being outsourced at that point. So more ownership was actually moving to different countries, right? And what was happening post that is there's a sort of simultaneous digital expertise that was being built in as we were outsourcing more and more. So, as and when processes were being outsourced, there's an expertise that builds in by getting more speed, by getting more efficiencies, and by doing this all through digitalization. And this is what time has taken us towards, where in the 2020s, we're in this phase of reinvention. And we're not just talking about automation, which started in, let's say, the 2015s. Now we're at the stage of agentic, right, which is the hot new tech in town, and not new anymore, in fact. But this is not just the brain, right? This is also the body. So agentic is not just like Gen AI, where you're just sort of getting some insights or some advice on what you should be doing. Agentic is actually doing things for you. So it's your execution arm as well, right? So this is where we're at right now. We're becoming more goal oriented. We're using agentic to do a lot of autonomous execution of tasks. And this is where expertise is coming in to outsourcing. So now when you think of global companies where they were just thinking of this as a cost leverage solution, it's not that anymore. It's actually the era of value creation, wherein they're seeing a lot of benefit, speed, and efficiency in terms of outsourcing, and they can't do it so well in house anymore, which is why this is a major advantage that we've been getting, right? So with that, if we just move on, what we'll see is that there's a lot of emphasis on understanding what should be outsourced, right? And you can see all the lightning striking in with different things coming in. So there's an era of Y2K, there's an era of COVID, and then there's an era of agentic AI that came in. And with all of these things happening, what we're seeing is that there's an emphasis on figuring out what to outsource. So, as work placement expectations are evolving with agentic AI led systems, what we're actually having to think about is that should we not just outsource? Maybe we can just automate this process, right? Or maybe we can just get tech to do this for us. So, there's a large company actually that we're talking to right now, and sourcing leaders thinking about outsourcing large parts of their BPO processes. And they're talking to us in terms of building frameworks to understand what to outsource, what to offshore, and what is it that they can just automate and they don't need to send anyone anywhere, right? So maybe just get best of breed tools to come and do that for them and not think about outsourcing decisions. But having said that, there's an entire blend of humans plus agents that is now coming into the mix, right? So if you see this little green box in the middle, what you'll see is that earlier it was more of humans, process, execution, everything was run by them. But now there's a blend of human plus agents. And because of this, there's an expectation change that has happened in the market. So there's a fundamental shift in the way we're working, right? So there's HR, there's sourcing, there's the partner ecosystem. We're all sort of coming together, and the expectations from the that the buyers have from providers is also changing because of that. So we're expecting more of pilots, we're expecting different work efficiency metrics from HR. We're also trying to understand who has the accountability, right? So is it an agent being orchestrated by a provider, or is it more of humans that are sort of doing the process and managing workflows and just using some amount of AI to get through it? So more and more questions like that are getting asked. And it's really there's a case study that we've sort of put in here of application support services and how we've seen it change by a lot. But this is not just IT, right? This is all across the board. This is across BPO, this is across engineering services, as well as the overall global services market. So now, what I mean, of course, a lot of changes happening. Tech is a big lever that's coming in. What we also want to sort of highlight here is that, like I mentioned, over the past year, there have been a lot of things that have happened. So things have not been very rosy throughout the past year or throughout the past couple of years, right? Macroeconomic changes. If we move to the next slide, you'll see that there have been a lot of shifts in terms of, buyers are operating in a perma crisis, right? There's not just one crisis that has happened. There's been multiple things that keep happening. Some of them are more common. You'll say that, okay, inflation, foreign exchange volatility, these are things that have been happening for a long time. But then there's a lot of geopolitical events that have been happening over the past years. And this is why buyers are actually thinking more and more about what is safe for them to do versus what is not. And the decisions are getting questioned as well. So, as you know, there have been a lot of talks about tariffs. There have been talks about the H-1B visa fee. There have been talks about the Hire Act, which is actually a direct impact on outsourcing, right? How much to be outsourced. And because of all these risks and because of all these macroeconomic, geopolitical things that are happening, there's a lot of transition that needs to happen in the way buyers are thinking about outsourcing as well. So, what we'll tell you is that there is a certain amount of anxiety that came up because of these things. Our clients, our buyers have been asking us a lot of questions about these areas, particularly about, what do we do when this is happening? Is it going to impact sourcing in India, let's say, or are there some new questions that we should be asking our suppliers related to risk, just to be, just to be ensured that we are covered from all ends? So, as we have these kind of questions being asked more and more, what we need to do, if we move to the next slide, is that we need to understand that there's a certain amount of compliance and risk that needs to be inbuilt into the procurement and vendor management ecosystem. When I say that, what do I mean? I'll give you an example of an insurance client, right? We were recently talking to them, and they said that what they've done is that there's a separate sort of role assignment or work assignment within the procurement team who is just looking at what they should be doing when it comes to risk and compliance related to tech and AI related suppliers. So there's an approval workflow that comes in whenever a new specialist supplier or new startup has come into the system, whether the company should even work with that supplier or not. There's a set of questions we ask them, right? And we get that information. If we don't get the approval, you cannot work with that supplier, right? That's one example. The risk questionnaires are becoming larger and larger. While buyers are thinking that they need to be more practical about asking questions, we can't give suppliers a whole essay. But there's been more and more focus, especially in the large legacy companies, you can imagine. There's more pressure on them to ensure that risks are not increasing, or they're not putting themselves in a position where branding actually gets affected for them. So there's a lot of aspects that are getting added within the ecosystem to ensure that we are covered from that end. And as we think about that, of course, the questions are being asked again, right? So, can we outsource this AI led work without actually violating our own AI governance policies? Are the vendors even equipped to handle these regulatory shifts in the future? And should we even be sort of moving more roles onshore, offshore, because more and more immigration gaps are coming in? So, all of these questions are coming in our buyers' minds, and we're really trying to navigate it more effectively. All right. And with that, I think what we want you all to focus on, this is what we leave you with, right? In this particular section, at least, is if we move to the next page, we'll see that there's a certain balance you need to actually strike. So there's why is this balance mattering, right? We've actually put a weighing scale here. There's a lot of tech that's coming in. So you're getting pushed to actually move very fast, you automate more, get more specialists, work with startups, you or you'll be left behind. If you're not doing all this, you'll actually be left behind because everyone is thinking about these things now. So we're getting pushed to automate more and get more innovative in the approach we work on. Whereas on the other hand, we have all of these risks that are coming in. And what is permacrisis, right? It's when there's one risk followed by another risk, followed by another risk. So this is not just crisis, it's a series of things, events that keep happening one after the other. And in this age of permacrisis, how do you balance yourself from an innovation perspective? So this is the question of the hour, right? This is what we all need to answer. And some of these things depend so much on how innovative you are as an organization, how much risk comfort do you have, right? Some of these things are very internal. And we've seen firms that they're setting guardrails on what they're actually comfortable with versus what they're not, creating very detailed SOPs, guidelines on what can be done versus not, with clear role assignment on who will be that single throat to choke if something goes wrong, right? So that clear governance and accountability is being set more and more within procurement teams. All right. So with that, what we'll do now is we'll jump to the next section. And I don't see any questions coming in, by the way. So we do want you to, ask more and more questions as we go along this way. One of the things we want to offer you before we move actually is, if you see, we've actually put a link in the chat. This is actually a complimentary offer for all of you buyers who are out there to download one of our reports. So we all spoke about two things. One is on the tech side. So we're talking about agentic, and the other hand, we're talking about risk. So on both ends, we wanted to give you something, and we have an option for you to download one of these reports. One is on the rise of agentic AI, talking about how buyers are navigating agentic AI, a lot of industry related insights here. And the second one is a questionnaire. So this is really a toolkit for you to be able to actually get direct access to the questions you should be asking in your RFIs, or maybe just in your risk questionnaires on suppliers and how they're actually evolving themselves and evolving related to BCP, geopolitical resilience, and so on and so forth. So do avail this offer. It's a complimentary offer for all attendees of this webinar. All right, moving to the next section. Everyone, the link is in the chat. Now we'll be talking about outsourcing decisions and how you should be thinking about them. But before that, let's move on to the poll. So we do have some questions that we want to ask you. And this is the first one. Which factors matter most to your organization when deciding what to outsource in the current environment? So we'll give you, I think, 30 seconds or so, and let's see what responses we get. Do vote on this. So we see a lot of focus on strategic fit with business priorities. right, responses are moving quickly. Good amount of focus on talent and skills. What do you think, Mukesh, about these responses?
Yeah, so interestingly spread across, but yeah, strategic fit with business priorities does dominate it, which makes a lot of sense. I think most enterprises, when outsourcing, do look for a partner where which the vision of whom aligns with what they are thinking, and it's most important. And I think also talent and skills availability in the current market is something which is basically it's one of the top themes right now in terms of how do you secure a talent which is still maturing, right? When you're talking about agentic AI, it's not even a year old technology, but almost everyone is wanting that. So good interesting responses over here.
Yeah, definitely. I think I see risk exposure and compliance at a low, so that is really surprising me. But I think this group is very brave in terms of their tech. So digital innovation is quite high, talent is quite high, and risk is quite low. So that's great, right? Yeah. All right. Let's show the responses to everyone. I think can just view it. So we have 76% with prioritizing strategic fit with business priorities, whereas we have talent, we have digital and innovation, which are close seconds, right? Followed by risk. Very interesting results. All right. So with that, what I'll do is I'll hand it over to Shatakshi, and she will be taking us through the frameworks on how you need to think about outsourcing decision making.
Thanks, Manashi. Uh, yeah, thanks for moving to the next slide. Uh, I was also quite surprised with the results. We know that factors like strategic fit, market attractiveness, they do hold a lot of importance. They're still very fundamental to organizations when they are evaluating their outsourcing decisions. But what we have also seen is that they are no longer the whole story. We have seen organizations reframing the questions a bit when they're asking about strategic fit. It's not just that it is aligned with the business, but if outsourcing a particular activity is actually helping them reinvent, or is it actually helping them be resilient in times of such volatile situations? So questions like these, which are very fundamental, are getting reframed when we talk about agentic AI and permacrisis environment. Factors like talent and skills availability are becoming more nuanced. Uh, from a process maturity standpoint, earlier we used earlier the questions were more around if the process is scalable, if it's modular, if it could be transferred to some third party provider who can directly take the ownership and won't have that direct impact. But now it's also about whether it's AI compatible, whether agents could lead over, if they can take over the entire process. What about that? So these factors are becoming more nuanced in terms of how organizations are thinking about it. While these factors still hold a lot of importance, we have also seen that risk exposure and compliance requirement gaining a lot of heat in current environment. So, uh, I can give an example that our buyer organizations, which we were recently talking to, they were directly using business continuity assessments to finalize deals to ensure that everything is being managed in such a volatile situation. So business continuity in times of volatility does take a precedence when buyers think about outsourcing decisions. Similarly, I guess the response also said that 50% of the participants do think that digital and innovation potential is important, and that's what we are also seeing, that it has gained a lot of importance in the recent times when we talk about agentic AI systems. Automation demand is increasing, and now buyers are thinking about partners who can co-innovate with them, who can drive their innovation charter, who can drive the transformation agenda so that they are more closer to the business needs in the coming future and help them reinvent. Uh, so yeah, this here we talked about how the importance of these outsourcing decision factors is changing with time. If we can move to the next slide, uh, yeah, we can see that the lens itself is also changing. It's not just that we are reweighting the decision factors. We are also adopting a different lens to look at the same factors. So if we take an example on market attractiveness, the question earlier was, is there a mature vendor market? Or if we talked about process, was the process stable enough to move out? But now the narrative is more inclined towards, can the provider adapt with me? Can they ensure compliance in a shifting policy landscape where new and new policies are coming very quickly, and you need to adapt to them in a with a very quicker turnaround time. So can they co-innovate safely when with AI in the loop, with new AI policies coming and hovering around them? So these questions are getting subtly reframed as permacrisis environment and our tech landscape takes the center stage, to be honest.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
one of the things I want to link here, and Shad actually made a great point about speed, right? The example I was giving previously, a buyer we're working with who want to outsource, make these decisions about whether they should automate, outsource, offshore. What is their timeline about thinking, down selecting their vendors, going ahead with the entire RFP? It's actually going into H2 of next year. So imagine that they're starting now and they're thinking of closing H2 of next year because that's how fast the market is moving and that's how fast they want to evolve as well. So speed is becoming very critical when it comes to technology, when it comes to managing risks, and buyers are actually accelerating sourcing timelines because of this aspect.
Bhanushi made a great point. So these were the 2 points and which we wanted to make when it comes to outsourcing decision factors. First is the reweighting of the criteria, and second was adopting a new lens to the existing factors. So if we can move to the next slide, we can now talk about another important factor, which is the impact. So, potential impact of outsourcing activities organizations used to measure it, and also now also they measure it in terms of cost impact, business impact, operational impact. But it's not just limited to that. The impact story has also changed when we have entered this new era of driven by resilience and reinvention. The value of outsourcing today, as we stand, exceeds far more beyond cost efficiency or operational stability. We agree that these impact measures are important, but we are also seeing that delivering strategic momentum to what organizations are currently doing, helping them scale faster, responding quickly to the market shifts, and staying resilient is becoming a key driver when measuring impact. So organizations think whether outsourcing a particular activity will help them scale faster or will make them more agile so that they can focus on their core competitive advantage, or it can help them achieve higher FLAs, higher customer experience, customer satisfaction based on accelerated responsiveness in in a changing landscape. I'm reiterating this again because we all know that it has been changing a lot in the current timeline. And when they talk about they are talking about the market landscape. They're not just thinking about the vendor ecosystem in terms of positive externalities, but they're also thinking about uh, are they going to get access to innovation? Are they going to get access to advanced tech like agentic AI? Will it help them achieve what they want in the current timeline? So that expertise is so impact which helps them drive long-term competitive advantage is what organizations are now looking at. And we'll in next section we'll see how both these factors, outsourcing decision factors and measuring the potential impact, sort of helps how to club both of these lenses into a strategic decision framework, and how we can leverage that to map out which activities should be outsourced first. And I'll now hand it over to Mukesh to
Yeah.
lead the discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Shatakshi. And thank you for setting it up so nicely in the previous two sections. And this will be an example of what has already been talked about till now. As Panushi mentioned, it's not just about IT or business process. I think the current environment, agentic AI, is affecting everything, all services across engineering, business process, and IT services. But we will be doing a deep dive into IT services for today. If you move on to the next slide. So, what are the first? We'll start with top trends in IT outsourcing, and we will see an overlap in terms of what was being talked about till now, because that was at a broader level in terms of how sourcing decisions are changing, and this is more specific from an IT sourcing standpoint. So things that are changing right now, right? So after a long period of caution, bias is slowly progressing with transformation agendas. So I think last 2 years or so, we saw that a lot of deals were being pushed back, right? Bookings were happening for providers, but it was not resulting into revenues because buyers were very cautious. Now we're seeing some of the large deals getting converted, and enterprises willing to transform their entire stack for becoming AI ready. It's not about large deals just from a sourcing or managing the existing state, but also from a transformation perspective. And we are starting to see multiple examples of this now. The second trend is in terms of how buyer organizations are outsourcing, and we see two distinct patterns. One is around value optimization, and second is AI readiness. Now, value optimization is the theme that has been going on for the last few years. I think it started in the post-COVID era where a lot of investments were made very quickly, and then enterprises realized that are we really getting the value out of what we have already invested? And that's when they started questioning their outsourcing partners that, what's the value we are getting? Can you build a value framework for us? And that continues, right? So essentially, everyone has made a lot of investments, be it in terms of cloud, be it in terms of other digital transformation related investments. Now people are ensuring that they are getting value from what they have already invested, and that's one side of what's happening. And the second side is more forward looking in terms of AI readiness. So enterprises are looking to transform their entire IT stack right across the infrastructure, application, data layer to ensure that they are becoming AI ready, right? It's not just select pockets of enterprises are transforming, but as an enterprise, are they becoming AI ready or not? The third one is very interesting, and we have been talking about this, and potentially we will keep talking about this till the end of the webinar. Is how digital agents and inclusion of digital agents in service delivery is becoming a default expectation amongst most enterprises. So we saw a chart. So we saw a chart where we are moving away from pure human to a mix of human plus digital agents, and this is very much real across most deals. We see enterprises asking for this. Somewhere we do feel that a lot of enterprises are not able to articulate it very well in terms of they are expecting digital agents, but the trend around expectation that it will not just be human workforce delivering everything is becoming very common now, and it is a common part of most RFPs that we see. Fourth, from a, again, IT outsourcing perspective, from an infrastructure layer, I talked about all layers are getting transformed. If we go into each of these layers, what we see is from an infra layer, core infrastructure and private cloud are regaining strategic relevance as enterprises seek more control. In the past few years, again, enterprises moved a lot to public cloud, hyperscalers, but now, with AI and agentic AI, potentially they are realizing that the spend will become too high if they keep operating on these hyperscalers, and therefore they are moving back to their own private cloud environment and core infra and their own infrastructure as well. The second thing, if you're doing a deep dive into some of these IT outsourcing areas, is the cyber risk. I think again, 2, 3 years back, potentially cyber security was more an afterthought. But right now, if we talk about some of the key technology trends and we talk about cybersecurity, cloud, AI, cybersecurity ranks right at par with AI, right? If you were to give a ranking, potentially it comes at number one along with the investments in AI and agentic AI happening right now. And if we talk about the application layer, what we are again observing is that while the past few years were about cloud native transformation, now we are seeing that the modernization agenda is actually moving to not just cloud transformation or being ready for the cloud, but being ready for AI related transformation, and it's becoming more of an AI native stack. So we'll move on to the next slide and do a bit of deep dive into how this is applying. And before that, we actually have a poll. And which of the following IT services does your organization outsource more? We'll be seeing some very interesting analysis around this in terms of what we are observing in the market, how these stack, which are outsourced more versus outsourced less, and some of the results are actually very interesting once you see the 2 by 2 chart that's there. So as the results start to come in, I think yeah, it's interesting. Application maintenance services potentially is one of the highest outsourced areas. Same about app dev. Very interesting. AI is AI services is slightly lower based on what I'm seeing so far. We'll wait for the poll to complete. I think just wait for a few seconds and then we will close the poll. Once the poll is closed, yeah, I think we can close the poll now. And again, once hope everyone can see the results now. So very interesting. I think the traditional services, which are application development, application maintenance services, they continue to be most outsourced, and followed by cloud, cybersecurity, and digital workplace, almost equal contribution. And we'll see this result actually maps very well to what's there in our next slide. AI services is interesting, potentially because it's a new area. Not a lot of enterprises might be outsourcing it. Um, if we move on to the next slide, I think we'll see some of this in terms of how this is reflecting and how we are observing this in the market. So almost um, mapping back to the kind of results we were seeing, right? So application, cloud and infrastructure services, digital workplace services, these are traditional services which have been outsourced for a long period of time right now, and therefore in terms of maturity we see all of them at around similar maturity, which we are also seeing in the poll right now, right? It was very similar if you looked at application, cloud, digital workplace services, and so on. Cybersecurity again is an area which has started to be outsourced in the last couple of years. Outsourcing has become more rampant, and people are understanding the need and also understanding that you need very specific skill sets to do some of this. And therefore, we are seeing that moving forward. If you talk about digital workplace services, this is the highest from an outsourcing penetration, most mature services. If you talk from an IT services perspective, here also we are seeing some interesting trends. And the trends, if we talk about some of the emerging trends, right, based on the current maturity and mapping it back to the environment we are right now in terms of how AI is evolving, we see some of these also varying, right? For example, we talk about digital workplace services. A lot of it is around contracting, right? Outcome driven contracting, AI infused managed services, from tower led to product led outsourcing. So this actually indicates that the outsourcing maturity in this is quite high. While when we talk about something like a cybersecurity services, which is still maturing, we see vendor consolidation happening, right? So this indicates a movement where things are being outsourced now, enterprises are maturing. They're also seeing the shift towards outcome-based contracting and enterprises demanding AI-driven cybersecurity services. I'm not going to go through all of this. This can be consumed later also, offline also. But net, I think the key message here is that we are seeing some shifts happening based on the current maturity of different service categories and how AI is able to penetrate and influence some of these services within these service categories. So we can move on to the next slide, actually, and then we'll see a very detailed analysis that we have carried out. Now, again, what we need to keep in mind is that this may not be entirely reflective of the changing world and changing environment right now. We do believe that some of this will shift over the next 1 year or so, but right now, if we take about the last 2, 3 months, based on this analysis, is based on which. So there we see, again, mapping it back to what we were seeing on the last slide. And I'll quickly walk through this two by two, right? So what it means is, what we have done over here is we have mapped the outsourcing suitability of a particular service with respect to the potential impact it can create if it is outsourced. And again, not a lot, few surprises are there, but in general, if you look at the right hand top corner, operate services, cloud security services, data BI platform, private cloud hosting, service desk. So some of these are areas which have been very commonly outsourced for quite some time. Some areas do come up as surprises. For example, things including security and IAM starting to become more outsourced, which we also talked about on the last slide. What is interesting in how this could be useful for buyers is potentially this is kind of a decision matrix. Obviously, it will be contextual to different enterprises based on where you are in your overall outsourcing journey and digital transformation journey. But how can you go about thinking around which IT services to outsource, not outsource, and so on. And again, this is based on a collection of what we are observing in the market right now across different enterprises. But it's just gives a quick sneak peek into how potentially you can go about outsourcing. We'll quickly move on, and then we'll also just wind this section up talking about what are changing, right? So what's changing from a buyer lens in terms of IT outsourcing? What we are observing is that the IT outsourcing market primarily in the last many years was focused on labor and cost-based models, especially if we talk about how offshoring rose and how some of the service providers, Indian service providers grew. A lot of it was based on labor and cost arbitrage. Now what we are observing to see is that model is cracking and we are seeing a new model emerging, which is more around AI augmented, proximity driven and outcome linked delivery. So the three key changes that we are observing, right? And again, we can do a lot of deep dive into it, but at a broad level, if you're talking about the key changes that are happening, is one from a full stack human IT pod to plus a pyramid delivery model, right? So you talk about L1, L2, L3, L4. It was all shaped in a pyramid. We are now moving towards a combination of human and AI in terms of operating pods. Right, so all of the services essentially, it's not just being delivered by humans alone. It will be a combination of human plus AI, and the pyramid delivery model is also shifting where we are seeing, say, L1 shrinking and L1 shrinking, even some of the L2 shrinking, and it's starting to become more like a diamond shaped delivery model. There can be multiple variations of diamond delivery model. It will vary based on the service that is being outsourced, based on the enterprise maturity, and so on. But in general, we see that the delivery model, how it used to be, the talent structure that is changing. Second, offshore heavy cost benefits. Potentially, some of this will go down. It's not it will go away completely. That still remains relevant from a cost perspective, but we are seeing that there is demand for more onshore and nearshore center of excellence that's becoming the default delivery model in a lot of outsourcing contracts where proximity and AI governance are being asked for. So as enterprises are using more AI and digital agents, They are seeking out their outsourcing providers to be near them, ensure that there's a very strong governance structure in place as well. And finally, from a commercial model perspective, we see that we are really starting to move away from an FT based or fixed pricing model to more output based. And we do believe that future looking models are starting to consider agents and platform costs also being embedded within it. Right now we do not see it very mature, right? That it's not that it can be laid out very clearly that this is the cost of an agent and this is how the contract will be linked. But enterprise is very curious to understand that, if you're using agents, how does my pricing change? And we are starting to see a lot of these questions leading to a change in the commercial model being offered by service providers as well. So with that,
Yeah.
I will wrap up this section and hand it over to Bhanushi for quick insights into how do we apply all of this in some real life scenarios and how can we plan ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the most interesting things here is also that as pricing models change, Mukesh, it's also about SLAs changing, right? So earlier we were more, every buyer used to talk about, okay, there's a watermelon effect. SLAs are sort of green on the outside, red on the inside. And now, as dissatisfaction was growing more and more with providers, there was more focus on having more innovation, right? More process efficiency or more automation and all of that. So SLAs have changed a lot as well, along with pricing models because of this whole AI-led innovation angle that has been brought into the system. So I just wanted to bring that in as well as we talk about pricing, contracting. There's a lot of commercial implication of getting AI into the ecosystem, and there's a lot of conversation we have around those aspects as well. So, with that, I think, what we wanted to do was quickly wrap up the session. And I know we have a few questions here, so we definitely want to leave some time to answer your questions. And what is it that you should be doing from a practical level as you prepare for the next year, right? For 2026, we're almost in November, end of year. We are closing in all the important projects for this year. But as we go for next year, what should we do? So if we move to the next page, what we feel you should be doing as of now. Firstly, okay, sorry about that. There's a poll that we need to do. We want to ask you about what is the capability that you need to strengthen to actually future-proof your outsourcing decisions in 2026. Um, would be great to see all of your responses. We see that delivery flexibility. Okay, there's a lot of movement in the responses as we see them coming in. More focus on scenario planning and cost exposure modeling. I think the key aspect is that there's a lot of flex that we actually expect from suppliers as well at this point, right? There's a lot of contracting flexibility. Even in terms of deal tenures, what we've seen is that deal tenures are becoming a lot shorter because we expect that, we'll be making those decisions sooner and sooner rather than later. So long-term contracts are becoming less and less common. And scenario planning and cost exposure modeling. Okay, 41% have selected this. Great. So as we future proof going forward, there's a lot of different things that may happen. So planning from the beginning itself as to what will our costs be, what is it that we are comfortable with, that is something that is taking, I guess, the most amount of weight over here, right? With 39% of you selecting that, following delivery flexibility and contracting flexibility, which is actually an expectation from your suppliers themselves. And linking to the point we mentioned before, there's lesser focus on regulatory readiness, which is again surprising to me at least to hear about this because from our at least conversations, we've been hearing a lot about risk and regulations taking top priority when it comes to decision making. But it seems like outsourcing is still going to be on the rise, or at least in terms of the decision making, it's not becoming a bigger and bigger parameter. Maybe it's something like it's table stakes. And this is something we have to have, and the rest is actually something we need to plan for. Great. So I think with that, we'll move and we'll, provide a quick snapshot of what are the things that you need to do as you plan for 2026. This is our perspective. through various conversations, various client engagements that we've been doing over the past couple of years. Firstly, you need to really reweight criteria. So Shatakshi gave a huge metrics of what is important when you make those decisions, what goes on the impact level, what are the factors you consider. So there's focus on risk, there's focus on innovation, there's focus on costs, but the weightages really differ across companies. So some companies may place more focus on one factor versus another, and these matrices, sometimes we say you should actually make a model like a whole weighted scoring mechanism, or it could be any sort of framework you follow, and put it in and figure out where those decisions are getting placed for your company's benefits, right? Sometimes we may also say that you should actually have a ratio within your company, that how much are you actually comfortable to outsource in terms of overall work. We're only comfortable to outsource X percentage of it, right? Or X number of FTEs in terms of the percentage. So, really think about those internal ratios that you may have, and think about the impact that you'll actually be able to drive. Like, what is it that works for you in terms of cost, in terms of digital efficiency? What is it that you need, right? And there's an entire scenario based planning, of course, that you can do to drive these decisions. But as you get into vendor conversations, let's say you've decided you want to outsource, you want to offshore, and you want to automate, all of those work processes are sort of mapped out, that this is what you're doing across each process, this is how much you're outsourcing. Then you actually really talk to vendors in a flexible way, ensure your contracts allow that flexibility, because things change, right? Things change, and you may need their support more than you have maybe accounted for over the next couple of years. And I think one last thing that we want to end with here is that when we think about, like I mentioned, regulatory preparedness or contractual readiness, these things are table stakes. So you have to ensure that you're building in the right kind of clauses. However much your supplier may come and provide innovation, however much disruptive they may be, you need to have those indemnity clauses being very strong in your contracts. Otherwise, if your reputation as a legacy, large companies, reputation is very important. So as sourcing leaders, we need to really think about branding and our reputation, which is at stake when we're working with external ecosystems. All right. With that, what we'll do is we'll end this webinar, and we'll move to our Q&A round, which is my favorite round, because we really get to hear from you as to what is it that you're facing as challenges day to day. What are the problems you're facing as you make those decisions? So, all right, let's see. I think let's take, so Kiran has asked a question. Maybe we can get started with that. So she's asking, given the point you make on risk, do you see a trend with buyers staying with their existing partner they have built a relationship over time with, and work with them maybe to drive necessary innovation? Or the second option is they choose to do it on their own and take the GCC route. Okay. Do you want to take this, Mukesh? Seems like an interesting question.
Yeah. So I can take it up, and feel free to add to this. So very interesting, and we actually are seeing both these happening right now. In fact, GCCs are something that have come up big time in the last 1.5 year or so. I think that's been all around the news as well. More than what's actually happening, it's out there. But we do see enterprises really taking the GCC route and strengthening it. But at the same time, there are multiple large enterprises who do prefer with existing partner and ensure that they are working together to drive the necessary innovation. So I think the answer to this is it really depends, right? And the broader trend, I would say, is not that choosing between one or the other. The GCC route is only done when it's more an enterprise-wide decision coming from the top. Else, I think if I had to put it, the preference to the existing partner kind of takes the major share over here, right? I think that's where the general preference is, that people do want to try that out first. If the issues are too much, then obviously they would need to shift to other provider or choose on their do it on their own.
That's a great point, actually, that there's no one right fit, right? All of these happen in parallel. And in fact, interestingly, we've been actually surveying this, right? We survey this almost every year, that, okay, from an organizational perspective, which route are you moving towards more? And we always get almost an equal weight of responses. So there's a good amount of balance. Both of these paths are being taken equally. All right. So this was an interesting question. What I also want to do is address some of the questions that we got previously, right? Which is some of you registered for the webinar and then you entered questions while registering for it. So let me just open one of those. Now, this was one which was related to risk again. So what someone has asked us is related to risk reward and how should risk reward sharing between buyers, basically what risk reward sharing mechanisms should buyers expect from service providers as outsourcing evolves? So let me take a stab at this and feel free to add as you go along, right? When it comes to risk reward sharing, we feel that there's a certain contracting mechanism. So we call this gain share, right? More skin in the game from providers, outcome based, as Mukesh was talking about. There's an expectation from providers over the past many years to get more and more outcome based. And there are different levels of adoption across subcategories. So, as you saw, there was a whole difference between subcategories being outsourced. Similarly, outcome based model adoption, higher in some categories where it's easier to gain share, very low in some categories. Hybrid models are what we see being the way to go. So, hybrid models mean that there's a component of outcome based, but there's a huge component of input, TNM, or output based as well. For example, in FNA, there's a large component of output based, but there's a certain amount of component of outcome based that is added into contracts. Now, as AI is coming in more and more, there's an increased shift to actually let providers put more skin in the game. So more shift towards outcome based is actually coming in. So, the interesting question, I think whoever put that in, we really wanted to take this up in this session, right? And answer this for sure. Just wanted to highlight here before we move to the next question, do request for a report if you haven't already. So we've just posted the link in the chat again, and you can request access to one of our two reports. One is on agentic AI, the other is a very practical toolkit on risk. So do click on that link and request for access. All right. I think there's another question that we've received. We're basically talking about setting up a captive. So Tyler is asking about setting up a captive and having it as a subsidiary of the parent company. And does it keep you compliant with the bills introduced in the US while avoiding the taxes and fees? They don't. Okay, so what are we advising to our clients that are worried about everything happening, but they still want to outsource? So this is where the regulatory angle comes in, right? Setting up a GCC does have a lot of regulatory compliances that we need to introduce. But there's a lot of benefit as well that we see happening. So there's maybe some GCCs are exploring more of India to India contracting benefits, and that's where those benefits actually come in. But having addressing the question about regulatory and compliance related aspects, especially related to the banking sector, we've received many questions such as this related to taxes, related to how to set up different entities, and legal and sort of taxing issues are there. However, that's not holding back decision making when it comes to outsourcing. It's just that things we need to figure out. We've been doing this for years, right? Banks, insurance companies, retail organizations, they've been setting up GCCs for years. So there is no impact on decision making when it comes to actually taking a benefit of the GCC or captive model. Um, so I think with that, what I want to say is that we don't focus, the decision making aspect based on regulatory. Again, it's a table stakes kind of capability that you have to manage all of that and also reap the benefits in some way when you come to the contracting aspects when you set up captives. All right. I think we have only a couple of minutes left, so maybe we can just take one small question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I do see one more question coming in. Is there any shift in the expectation of value being delivered through GBS or GCC in the world of agentic AI? I think the short answer is yes. Most enterprises once they are seeing it being done across their peers, are expecting the same to be delivered through GBS or GCCs, as we like to call it, right? In the world of agentic AI, I think most GCs are trying to develop the skills and talent around agentic AI, implement it in their processes. And that's where it becomes very interesting. I think GCCs had gained a lot of traction because a lot of technologies had become very mature. For example, if you talk about cloud or application development, application maintenance, most GCs were able to do this very seamlessly in the last couple of years. But now, with agentic AI, potentially everyone is facing that heat and challenge around developing that talent model. And that's where again we are seeing that shift towards outsourcing is slightly increasing again. And this is very cyclical. I think we keep seeing this shift between GCs and outsourcing. And right now, because of this new tech where providers are able to develop talent more quickly, I think the balance is shifting a bit towards outsourcing is what we are observing.
Always a good balance we all have to strike between all lenses, right? There's tech, AI, and there's GCC outsourcing. The right model is somewhere, but we all have to find it from our own lens. All right. Great. I think with only a minute left, we're good to close. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining this webinar. If you have any more questions, please feel free to shoot a note to us. Our email IDs are here, or you can just, find us. We're all there. You can drop a note. You'll be getting these slides as well post the webinar. So you can watch the recording if you missed out something. And we're happy to share more insights as needed. Thank you.